Robert Coleman hadn't cried in 8 years. Not once. But what happened in his study that Tuesday afternoon brought him to his knees. It started with $10,000, an open safe, and a 7-year-old boy who had nothing. What that child did in the next 15 minutes would either prove Robert right about people or destroy everything he believed. Robert Coleman was 70 years old, and he'd stopped trusting people, not because he was born bitter, but because everyone he'd ever loved had taken something from him. His business partners stole, his executives lied, even his own children, Richard, 45, and Patricia, 42, only called when they wanted money. 8 years ago, his wife Margaret died of cancer. While she was dying, his kids were in a lawyer's office fighting over his will. That's when something inside Robert went cold. He started testing people, leaving cash out, watching, waiting to see who'd take it, and they always did. Always. So Robert built a wall around his heart and made himself a promise: never trust anyone again. That Tuesday in October, he set up another test. His study, golden autumn, light through the windows. His personal safe wide open, $10,000 inside, just sitting there. Robert settled into his leather chair and closed his eyes, pretended to sleep. Outside, he heard his housekeeper Jessica begging Mrs. Chen to let her bring her son to work. Emergency. No childcare. Just 2 hours. Jessica was 35, a widow. Her husband Thomas died in a construction accident 3 years ago, left her with medical debt and a 7-year-old boy named John. She worked 2 jobs just to survive. Made $18 an hour at Robert's house, the best money she'd ever seen. She was terrified of losing it. Mrs. Chen finally agreed, with a warning. If Mr. Coleman sees that child, you're both finished. Robert, still pretending to sleep, felt something stir in his chest. A poor kid, a desperate mother, $10,000 sitting in an open safe. This is going to be easy. The door opened. Jessica rushed in with John, knelt down, whispered harsh and trembling. Sit here. Don't move. Don't touch anything. That man is sleeping. If you wake him, we lose everything. John, 7 years old, small and scared, nodded. Yes, Mama. She kissed his head and left. Now it was just Robert and the boy. Silence. The clock ticking. Robert's breathing slow and fake. He waited. 3 minutes passed. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Small, soft, coming toward the desk. Toward the money. Robert's heart pounded. Here we go. Another thief. Another lesson. But what happened next? Robert never saw it coming. Before we begin, like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because maybe you're here for a reason. Maybe you need to remember that God still works through the smallest hands, and the broken can still be made whole. The footsteps stopped, right beside the desk. Robert kept his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling, slow, steady, like a man deep in sleep. Inside, every nerve in his body was on fire. Just take it, kid. Take the money. Prove me right. He waited for the sound of paper rustling, small hands grabbing cash, a zipper opening on a backpack. But it didn't come. Instead, he heard something else, a sound he didn't expect. The heavy creak of metal. The safe door. It was moving. Robert's mind raced. What is he doing? Is he closing it? The door swung shut with a solid thunk. Then, the lock. Spinning, clicking, into place. Robert almost opened his eyes. Almost broke character. Did this kid just lock the safe? Then, John's voice. So quiet, like he was talking to himself. Mommy says open doors let bad things in. A pause. Mr. Coleman forgot to close it. Robert's throat tightened. He heard the boy move again. Small footsteps toward the desk. The combination dial. Robert tensed. Now he takes it. Now he steals. But John didn't take it. He picked it up, carefully, and placed it on top of the closed safe, out of sight. There, John whispered. All safe now. Robert lay there, frozen. His mind was screaming. This doesn't make sense. He's poor. That money could have fed them for months. Why didn't he take it? The boy moved around the room. Quiet, careful. Robert heard books being straightened on a low shelf. A pair of reading glasses being picked up off the floor, his glasses, the ones that had fallen earlier. John wiped them with his shirt, set them gently on the side table. Then the footsteps returned to the corner, the sound of a backpack unzipping, paper rustling. John sat down, pulled out homework, started writing, erasing mistakes, trying again, like a good kid, trying his best. Robert couldn't breathe. For 8 years, he'd been testing people, employees, partners, strangers. They all failed, every single one. But this boy, this 7-year-old kid with holes in his shoes and a second-hand shirt, had just walked past $10,000 like it wasn't even there. Why? Robert's carefully built worldview was cracking, splintering at the edges. He didn't understand, and before he could process it, before he could make sense of what just happened, he heard something that made his stomach drop. Footsteps in the hallway. Fast, frantic. Jessica. She was coming back. And when she saw that safe closed, when she realized her son had touched it, everything was about to explode. The study door flew open. Jessica burst in, breathless, her face drained of color. She'd finished cleaning in record time. Couldn't leave John alone any longer. Every second away from him felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Her eyes swept the room. John sitting quietly in the corner, homework spread out in front of him. Safe. Mr. Coleman still in his chair, eyes closed, sleeping. Relief flooded through her. Okay, we're okay. Then her eyes landed on the safe. It was closed. Her heart stopped. No. When she'd peeked in earlier just for a second, just to make sure it was safe to leave John here, that safe had been wide open. She'd seen it, the door hanging open, money inside. Now it was shut. The combination dial that had been on the desk, gone. Her knees nearly buckled. Oh God! What did he do? Jessica crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbed John by the arm, pulled him to his feet. Her voice came out harsh, desperate, a whisper that cut like glass. John David Martin, what did you do? John looked up at her, confused, scared by the tone in her voice. Mama, did you touch that safe? Her hands were shaking. Did you touch Mr. Coleman's things? Just what? Tears burned behind her eyes. What did you do? John's voice was small, trembling. The safe was open, Mama. You always say open doors are dangerous. I closed it so nobody could take his money. I put the lock thing on top where it's safe. Jessica's blood turned to ice. He touched it. Her son touched a billionaire's private safe. She looked at Robert, still sleeping, still unaware. But for how long? What if he woke up? What if he thought they tried to steal from him? What if he called the police? They'd lose everything. The job, the apartment, everything. Baby, you can't. Her voice broke. You can't touch other people's things. Mr. Coleman is going to think we tried to rob him. John's face crumpled, his eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to be bad. I was just trying to help. Jessica pulled him into her arms, kissed the top of his head, her own tears spilling over now. I know, baby. I know you were trying to help. But we have to leave, right now, before he wakes up. She grabbed their things, John's backpack, her purse, pulled him toward the door. Just get out before he sees, before he knows. They were 3 steps from the hallway, 3 steps from escape. Then a voice, low, rough, cold, as stone, cut through the silence behind them. Stop. Jessica froze. Every muscle in her body locked. She turned, slowly, her hand gripping John's so tight it hurt. Robert Coleman was sitting up in his chair, eyes wide open, staring straight at them. Robert didn't smile, didn't soften his face. He sat forward in his chair, slow, deliberate. Let them feel the weight of his presence. Jessica's hand tightened around John's. Her voice came out broken. Mr. Coleman, I'm so sorry. We're leaving. Right now. Leaving. Robert's voice was gravel, cold. You bring a child into my private study. The child touches my safe. And you think you can just walk out? Jessica's legs nearly gave out. Sir, please. He didn't mean any harm. He's 7. He didn't know. Robert stood, reached for his cane, leaned on it like it pained him to move. It didn't, but it made him look bigger, more dangerous. Come here, boy. Jessica pulled John behind her. Instinct. Protection. Sir, please don't yell at him. I'll take full responsibility. Whatever he did, it's my fault. Robert's eyes stayed locked on the child. I said, come here. His voice boomed across the room. John stepped out from behind his mother, small, skinny, shaking. But he walked forward. "It's okay, Mama." He stopped 3 feet from Robert, looked up at him. This giant, angry man in expensive clothes who could destroy their lives with one phone call. Robert stared down at him. Let the silence stretch. "Did you touch my safe?" John nodded, his voice steady despite the fear. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Robert's tone was sharp, demanding. "Explain to me why you touched something that doesn't belong to you." John swallowed hard. "It was open, Mr. Coleman. That's not safe. Bad people could take your money, so I closed it." Robert's jaw tightened. This is where they lie, where kids make excuses, blame someone else. But John didn't. He stood there, honest, explaining that he was trying to protect a stranger's money. Robert pushed harder. "And where did you put the combination dial?" John pointed to the safe. "On top, sir, behind the picture. So nobody can use it." Robert walked to the safe, moved the painting aside. The dial sat exactly where John said it would be, carefully placed, out of sight. Robert turned back. His chest felt tight. "You could have taken money from that safe, enough to help your mother, to buy food, clothes. Why didn't you?" John looked confused by the question, like he didn't understand why anyone would ask that. "Because it's not mine, Mr. Coleman." His voice was quiet, simple. "Mama says taking what's not yours makes you smaller inside, even if nobody sees you do it." The words hit Robert like a fist to the chest. "Makes you smaller inside." When was the last time anyone had talked about character, about being good when no one was watching? Robert stared at this boy, this poor, scared, honest boy who just quoted his mother's morality like it was the only truth that mattered. The test was falling apart. Robert's carefully built trap, his proof that everyone was greedy, was crumbling, but he wasn't finished. Not yet. He had one more card to play, one final test. If this boy was truly good, if his heart was as pure as it seemed, this would prove it. Robert's face hardened. "There's a problem." Jessica's voice cracked. "What problem?" Robert pointed to his leather chair. "Your son's jacket. It was wet from the rain. Look at the armrest." Jessica rushed over, stared at the chair. It looked fine to her. "I don't see." "The oil from small fingers," Robert lied, his voice smooth, practiced. "This is Italian leather. Costs $300 per square foot. Fingerprints cause permanent damage. It needs professional restoration." Jessica's face went white. "How? How much?" Robert delivered the blow. $800. Jessica actually staggered backward. $800. More than her rent. More than she made in 2 weeks. "I don't have that kind of money." Her voice barely a whisper. "But I'll work it off. Extra hours. Please, sir. Please. Just don't fire me." Robert watched her beg, watched her break. This was the moment. The moment parents turned on their kids, screamed at them for costing money they didn't have. He waited. But Jessica didn't yell. She knelt down, pulled John into her arms. "It's okay, baby. We'll figure it out. It's not your fault." John pulled back, his young face serious, old beyond his years. "Mama, don't cry." His voice was steady now. "I'll fix it." Jessica shook her head, tears streaming. "Baby, you can't." But John was already reaching into his backpack. His hands were shaking. "I can pay." Robert almost scoffed. What could a poor child possibly? Then he saw it. John pulled out a small leather case. Old, cracked, worn from years of being carried. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, a pair of wire-rimmed reading glasses, the lenses scratched, the frames bent slightly. John held them out to Robert, like they were made of gold. "These were my Pop-Pops." John's voice was shaking, but he didn't stop. "Pop-Pop died before I was born, but Mama says he was the best man in the world." He looked at the glasses in his hands, gently, like they were fragile. "He taught Mama to read with these. She was little. They didn't have money for school. But Pop-Pop sat with her every night, read the Bible, taught her words." Jessica's hand flew to her mouth, a sob caught in her throat. "John, no, baby, you can't." But John kept talking, his eyes on Robert now. "Mama was going to give them to me when I got older, so I could remember him." He held them out, his small hands steady, even though his lips were trembling. "I don't have $800, Mr. Coleman, but these are really special. Pop used them to see God's words every night. Mama says they helped him see clearly. John's voice dropped to a whisper. Maybe they're worth $800. Robert stared at the glasses, at this child standing in front of him, offering the only thing he had of a grandfather he'd never met. Jessica collapsed to her knees beside her son. Please, she begged. Please don't take those. They're all he has. I'll work for free. I'll do anything. Just don't take them. But John pulled away from her, looked up at Robert, eyes wet but determined. Mama, you always say helping people is never wrong, even if it costs you something. His voice cracked. You said Pop always helped people. He would understand. John stepped closer to Robert, held the glasses higher. Please don't be mad at Mama, Mr. Coleman. She needs this job. We don't have anywhere else to go. Robert took the glasses from John's outstretched hand. They were light, warm from being in the boy's backpack, worthless to anyone else. But as Robert stared at them, at the scratched lenses, the bent frames, the cracked case, something inside his chest began to splinter. He remembered his own father, cold, critical, taught him that business was war, that kindness was weakness. He remembered his children, Richard and Patricia. They'd never sacrificed anything for him. They took, demanded, expected. This 7-year-old boy who had nothing was offering his most precious possession for a lie, for a test Robert had set. Robert's throat tightened, his eyes burned. The glasses blurred in his vision, and for the first time in 8 years, since the day Margaret died, Robert Coleman felt his walls begin to crack. His hands started to shake. Jessica watched him, terrified. John watched him, hopeful. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then Robert's face twisted, his breath caught, and something neither Jessica nor John expected happened. A tear rolled down the billionaire's weathered cheek. Robert stood there holding the glasses, staring at them, his hand trembling. Jessica and John watched him, frozen, waiting. The silence felt like it would never end. Then Robert sank back into his chair. His shoulders collapsed inward. More tears came, slow, heavy, like they'd been trapped for years. John stepped forward, worried now. Mr. Coleman, are you okay? Robert couldn't speak. He looked at this boy, this 7-year-old child who'd just offered up everything he had to save his mother. And Robert saw something he hadn't seen in decades. Pure goodness. Not naive, not foolish. Just good. The boy knew they were poor, knew $800 could destroy them, knew those glasses were all he had of his grandfather. But he'd offered them anyway, because protecting his mother mattered more than protecting himself. Makes you smaller inside, even if nobody sees. The boy's words echoed in Robert's mind, and suddenly, Robert understood. He'd spent 8 years making himself smaller, testing people, proving they were rotten, building walls around his heart so high nothing could reach him. He'd become the very thing he hated. His throat tightened. His voice came out broken. I'm a liar. Jessica didn't understand. Sir, Robert looked at her, then at John. I lied about everything. His voice cracked. The leather isn't damaged. Your son didn't break anything. I made it up. Jessica's face went pale, confused. Robert kept talking, the words spilling out now. The safe. I left it open on purpose. The money. I wanted someone to take it. I wanted to catch them. He wiped his face roughly with his hand. I've been testing people for years. My staff, my partners, my own children. They all took what they could. His voice dropped to a whisper. But your son. He couldn't finish. Robert looked at John. At this boy who'd closed the safe, who'd tried to keep a stranger safe, who'd offered his grandfather's glasses to save his mother. You're raising a king, Robert said to Jessica, his voice thick with shame. A boy who had every reason to take, every justification. That money could have changed your lives. He held up the glasses. And when I lied, when I set another trap, he gave me this. Robert's face twisted with pain. He was willing to lose his connection to his grandfather, to save you, to protect your job. Jessica was shaking her head, backing away. We don't want your money. We just want to live with dignity. But Robert stood, walked to his desk, pulled out the $10,000 from the safe. His hands were shaking as he brought it to her. Then take it with dignity. Buy your son shoes that fit. Buy yourself time to breathe. He pressed the cash into her hands. And let me ask you something. He looked at John, at this boy, who'd just taught him what honor looked like. "Would you let him visit me?" Robert's voice broke. "Would you let an old man who lost his way try to learn how to be good again?" Jessica stared at the money. At Robert. At her son. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know what to say. And neither did John. Because how do you respond when a billionaire confesses he's broken and asks a child to save him? Jessica stood there, holding the money. $10,000. More than she'd seen in her entire life. Her mind was racing, spinning. This doesn't make sense. Rich people don't just give away money. They don't confess. They don't cry. She looked at Robert. At this billionaire who'd just admitted to testing them, to lying, to playing games with people's lives. Part of her wanted to throw the money back at him and walk out. But another part, the part that was exhausted, broke, and terrified, whispered something else. What if he means it? Why? Her voice came out raw. Why would you do that to us? Robert's face crumpled. Because I've been hurt so many times, I stopped seeing people. I only saw thieves. He looked at John. Your son proved me wrong, and it broke something in me I thought was dead. Jessica's hands tightened around the cash. You don't know us. You don't know what we've been through. You're right, Robert said quietly, but I know what I saw today. I know your son has something my children will never have. He paused. A heart that hasn't been poisoned by the world yet. Jessica looked down at John. He was staring up at her with those wide, trusting eyes. Mama? Is he sad? Her throat tightened. Yes, baby. I think he is. John looked at Robert, tilted his head. Pop used to say sad people need friends. Robert's breath caught. John walked closer to him, slowly, like approaching something fragile. You can keep the glasses if you want, Mr. Coleman, but maybe you don't need to pay for them. Robert knelt down, eye level with the boy now. What do you mean? John's voice was soft, honest. Maybe you just need someone to talk to. That's what Mama does when I'm sad. She talks to me. Robert stared at this child. This boy who'd just offered friendship instead of payment. Something inside Robert shattered completely. He looked up at Jessica, tears streaming down his face now. I don't deserve this. Jessica's own eyes were wet. Maybe none of us get what we deserve, she said quietly. Maybe we just get chances. Robert nodded, unable to speak. Jessica took a breath, made a decision that terrified her. John can visit, Tuesdays and Thursdays after school. 1 hour. Robert's face lit up. Desperate, grateful. Thank you, thank you. Jessica held up a hand. But if you ever lie to him again, if you ever test him like you did today, we're gone. You understand? Robert nodded. I understand. Jessica looked at her son, at this boy who just saved a billionaire's soul with a pair of old glasses and a kind heart. Come on, baby. Let's go home. They walked toward the door. But before they left, John turned back. Mr. Coleman? Yes. Next time I come, can you teach me about buildings? Mama says you make really tall ones. Robert's smile was the first real one he'd felt in years. I'd love that, son. The word slipped out. Son. And somehow, it felt right. The door closed behind them. Robert stood alone in his study, holding a pair of scratched reading glasses. And for the first time in 8 years, he didn't feel empty. He felt something else. Something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. But what Robert didn't know yet, what he couldn't possibly know, was that this wasn't just the beginning of healing. It was the beginning of a legacy that would change everything. 3 months later, Robert's study looked different now. The curtains were open, light poured in, and every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, a small desk sat in the corner near the bookshelf. John's desk. Custom made, just his size. Robert sat at his own desk, reviewing contracts. John sat at his, doing homework. It had become their routine. Jessica had been promoted to household manager, triple her old salary. She ran Robert's charitable foundation, now programs for single parents, scholarships for kids like John. She'd tried to refuse at first. I don't need charity, she'd said. Robert had looked at her. It's not charity. It's paying you what you're worth, something I should have done years ago. Now, 3 months in, everything felt different. Robert felt different. The night after John and Jessica left with the glasses, Robert hadn't slept. He'd sat in his study until dawn, crying, thinking, reading Margaret's old journals. She'd written about him, about how his bitterness was killing him, how she'd prayed every night that he'd remember how to love before it destroyed him completely. "Robert has forgotten that people aren't transactions," she'd written. "He's forgotten that the richest thing we ever had wasn't money. It was each other." Those words had gutted him. The next day, he'd called Jessica, asked if the offer still stood, if John could visit. She'd said yes, and everything changed. Robert had apologized to old friends he'd pushed away, former employees he'd wrongly accused. He'd even tried reaching out to Richard and Patricia. They hadn't responded well. "What's your angle, Dad?" Richard had asked. Suspicious, cold. "No angle," Robert had said quietly. I'm trying to be better." Patricia had laughed. Better? Or lonely? They hadn't visited since, but John had. Twice a week. Every week. And slowly, so slowly, Robert almost didn't notice the stone around his heart crumbled. Now, in the present moment, John closed his math book, walked over to Robert's desk. "Done already?" Robert asked. John nodded, handed him the homework. Robert checked it. One small mistake. He showed John where, explained gently. "You're brilliant, you know that?" John grinned. "You call me that a lot now." Robert paused, realized it was true. "Is that okay?" John's face grew serious, thoughtful. "You also call me son sometimes." Robert's chest tightened. He hadn't meant to. The word, just, slipped out. Usually when John did something that made Robert proud, which was often. "Does that bother you?" Robert asked carefully. John shook his head. "No, I like it. I never had a grandpa before. Pop died before I was born." Something shifted in Robert's chest. This boy. This beautiful, honest, kind boy. He was more of a son than Richard and Patricia had ever been. Robert looked at John, made a decision he'd been wrestling with for weeks. "John, I need to talk to your mother about something important. Would you go find her?" John's eyes widened. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Robert said softly. "The opposite." John ran off. Robert walked to his desk, pulled out a document from the bottom drawer. His lawyer had prepared it 2 weeks ago. The will revision. Robert had stared at it every day since, wondering if he had the courage. Now, holding it in his hands, he knew. He was ready. Because some decisions aren't about blood. They're about love. 10 years passed. Not quickly. Not easily. But they passed with something Robert had forgotten existed. Joy. John grew. From 7 to 17. From a small boy doing homework in the corner to a young man sitting in board meetings, asking questions that made executives uncomfortable. Robert had paid for his education, private school, tutors. Not because John needed them, the kid was brilliant, but because Robert wanted to give him every chance he'd never had. Every Tuesday and Thursday became every day. John would come after school, do homework, have dinner with Robert. They'd talk about buildings, business, life. Sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence. The kind of silence you can only have with people who know you, really know you. Robert had tried God. He'd tried to reconnect with Richard and Patricia. He'd invited them to dinners, sent letters, called. They came once. Together, 6 years ago. Sat stiffly in the dining room, asked about the will, about their share. When Robert mentioned John how the boy had changed his life, Patricia had scoffed. "You're replacing us with the maid's kid?" Robert's face had gone cold. "No. I'm choosing someone who sees me as more than a bank account." They'd left angry, never came back. Robert had grieved that. Quietly, in moments when John wasn't around. But the grief didn't consume him, because he had something they'd never given him. Love, real love. The kind that didn't ask for anything in return. Now, in Robert's study, a glass case hung on the wall. Inside it, Pop's reading glasses, museum lighting, carefully preserved. Below them, a small plaque. These glasses taught one man to read God's word and taught another man to see God's love. Gift of wisdom from John Martin. Age 7. Robert looked at them every day. Remembered. That Tuesday afternoon. The test, the offering. The moment his life changed. He was 80 now. His doctors said his heart was failing. Slowly. Peacefully. "You've got maybe a year," they'd told him 6 months ago. Robert had smiled. A year was enough. He'd already done what needed to be done. The will, the video, the instructions, everything in place. Jessica knew. He'd told her 3 months ago, made her promise not to tell John yet. Let him have a little more time, Robert had said, before he has to grieve. Now, sitting in his study on a quiet afternoon, Robert heard the front door open, John's voice calling out, "Robert, you here?" Robert smiled. John had stopped calling him Mr. Coleman years ago, started with Robert, then, quietly, one day, Grandpa. Robert had cried when he heard it. "In the study, son." John walked in, 17, tall now, handsome, wearing the suit Robert had bought him for college interviews. "How'd it go?" Robert asked. John grinned. "They offered me a full scholarship." Robert's chest swelled with pride. "Of course they did. You're brilliant." John sat down across from him. "I couldn't have done it without you." Robert shook his head. "You had it in you all along, John. I just gave you a chance." They sat in comfortable silence. Then John noticed something, Robert's hand, resting on an envelope on the desk. "What's that?" Robert looked at it, then at John. "A letter. For you, but not yet." John frowned. "For what?" Robert's smile was sad, knowing. "For after." John's face went pale. "After what?" Robert reached out, placed his hand over John's. "After I'm gone, son. When that day comes, you'll understand everything." John's eyes filled with tears. "Don't talk like that." But Robert squeezed his hand. "Listen to me. What I'm about to leave you isn't just money. It's a responsibility, a chance to build something good, something that matters." John shook his head. "I don't want your money. I just want you." Robert's voice broke. "I know. And that's exactly why you're the only one who deserves it." 3 months later, Robert Coleman died peacefully in his sleep. And 5 days after that, his family gathered for the reading of the will. What they heard would change everything. The study was crowded now. Attorney Marcus Webb sat at the head of the table. To his right, Richard, 55, and Patricia, 52, checking their phones, impatient. To his left, Jessica, 45, composed, dignified, her son beside her, John Martin, 17 years old, eyes red from crying. He'd barely slept since Robert died. Webb cleared his throat. "To Richard and Patricia Coleman, I leave $2 million each, held in trust, established when you were children." Richard and Patricia exchanged glances. Satisfied, they stood to leave. "Please sit," Webb said. "There's more." Patricia frowned. "More?" Webb continued. "To the rest of my estate, Coleman Property Group, all holdings, investments, this residence, and personal savings, I leave everything to John David Martin." Silence. Then Richard exploded. "That's insane. He's not even family. We'll contest this." Webb raised a hand. "Mr. Coleman anticipated that. He asked me to play something." A screen descended. Robert's face appeared, recorded weeks before he died. His voice filled the room. "Richard, Patricia, if you're angry right now, I understand. But ask yourselves, when was the last time you visited? Not to ask for money, just to see me." Richard's jaw tightened. Robert's image continued. "I invited you to dinners, sent letters, called. You came once in 10 years, and you asked about the will." His voice softened. "I'm not punishing you. I'm giving you what you wanted, money. But I'm leaving my legacy to someone who taught me what family actually means." The screen showed Robert holding Pop's glasses. "John was 7 when he closed my safe to protect me, when he offered these glasses to save his mother. In 10 years, he never asked me for anything. He gave me laughter, purpose, a reason to wake up." Robert's eyes glistened. "This isn't about blood, it's about love. And John loved a bitter, broken man until that man remembered he was human." He looked directly at the camera. "John, you gave me a second chance at life. Use this wealth to help people the way you helped me. Make it mean something. Build something good. Hopa." The video ended. Richard and Patricia stormed out. John sat frozen, tears streaming. Jessica squeezed his hand. Webb handed John a small package. "He wanted you to have this today." John opened it with shaking hands. Inside, Pop's reading glasses, the cracked leather case, and attached to it, a note in Robert's handwriting. "These taught your grandfather to see truth. They taught me to see love. Now they're yours again. Build something beautiful. I believe in you. I always will. Your friend, Robert." John held the glasses to his chest. And in that moment, he understood. Robert hadn't just left him money. He'd left him a mission, to prove that goodness still exists, that people can change, that one small act of kindness can save a life. Later that evening, John stood alone in the study. Golden light poured through the windows. Just like that Tuesday, 10 years ago. He placed his hand on the glass case, where the plaque still hung. "I promise," he whispered. "I'll make you proud." Outside, the world kept moving, but inside that room where a test once happened, where a boy once closed a safe, where an old man learned that the richest treasures aren't things you own, but people you love, something sacred remained. Proof that broken people can heal. That children can teach us to see again. And that sometimes, when we're lost in our own bitterness, God sends us exactly who we need. Even if they're only 7 years old. Even if they come with nothing but a kind heart and a pair of old glasses. Even if they show us that love, real love, isn't something you test. It's something you trust. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that goodness still lives in this world, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? What moment broke your heart open? Because maybe, just maybe, you needed this story today. Maybe you needed to remember that you're not too broken to be loved, not too lost to be found. God sees you, even in your bitterness, even in your pain. And sometimes, He sends help in the smallest, most unexpected ways.